Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. My name is Plami, and in this episode of Plami's Thoughts On, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on The Walking Dead World Beyond Episode 5, The Madman Across the Water. Or at least I think that's the name of the episode. The name of these series' episodes are very hard to remember, I'm gonna be honest. But before we get into the review, there are a few things I just want to address. First of all, I'm sorry I'm uploading this review so late. It's been like a week since that episode released, and even the next episodes have released, so I'm gonna be doing reviews of them right after this video. But it's because, and as you may also notice, my background is different. So the reason why I haven't uploaded anything for the last week and a little bit more than that is because I came back from the city that I was in because I had moved to a different city because I was going to university, and now because of COVID they've shut down in-person classes, so absolutely everything is online, so there was no reason for me to stay in that big city, so I came back home. And for the last week I've just been getting used to being back here because it's so weird for me after being away from this place for the first time in my life for like a month and a half, if not more. And I've also just been doing the online classes, so I just haven't had the time to record this, and for some reason I was just also in general procrastinating. But yeah, I finally decided to do this, so I guess without further ado, let's just get into it. And honestly, I would say I enjoyed this episode much more than the last one. At the very least, it didn't feel that there was something that they were trying to do in the episode and they were restricted by budget, or they were just half-assing it. Because if you remember in my review of the last episode, I was really annoyed by the fact that they had that wolf in the promo, thinking and making it as if it was going to be at least a big deal and a big obstacle that they would have to overcome in this episode. And the dog basically did nothing and didn't attack them, didn't attack walkers, didn't do anything. It didn't even fucking bark. It was just standing at a doorway and let them pass. That was it. So at the very least, there wasn't anything like that in this episode where I was like, oh man, I wish they did more with this. Although there was something that I wish in general the Walking Dead universe was doing more, and I'm gonna get to it in a second. But yeah, honestly, it's very hard for me to review World Beyond, and you might have noticed that I'm reviewing it differently from Fear the Walking Dead. That is because I feel like a lot of it is just not that memorable for me to be able to review it as I do for Fear the Walking Dead, where I recap each scene and I share thoughts that I have about each scene. But yeah, one thing I liked about this episode for sure is that in this episode there was more natural dialogue and more and better conflict, because I don't even really think there was much of a conflict in the last few episodes, but in this one I really enjoyed a lot of the conversations that certain characters had. Like in the beginning of the episode we have Felix and Elton talking about the fact that in the previous episode Elton basically kind of promised to help him convince the rest to come back to go back to the colony, the campus colony place where they were living. And in this episode Elton says that he didn't agree, but he didn't also disagree. And I really like that little interaction between them. It definitely solidified Felix and Elton as my favorite characters, I would say. They were probably the most interesting and the best acted so far, followed by Hope most likely, and I kind of don't really care about Silas. I feel like he could be really interesting, but he's kind of underutilized a little bit. And Hut or Huck, I don't know what her name is, I haven't really checked it out. It sounds like Hut to me, so I'm gonna call her Hut. And Iris are very much on the annoying side of things, but yeah, for the most part I'm not really even gonna mention them in this episode at the very least, because there's not much about them that I can say, especially for Iris, because she's gonna be a big focus on the review of the next episode, because she was a big thing about that episode. But yeah, I like what crossing the river in this episode kind of symbolized, I guess, and they even pretty much spelled it out in the episode, which annoys me a little bit. But I like how the river is basically the last obstacle that they would have to overcome, and which is why Felix was talking to Elton in the beginning of the episode, trying to talk him into talking the rest into coming back on the next day, because if they leave and pass the water, they probably will not gonna be getting back, because it's a big obstacle that it will take them a lot to overcome, and once they do, it would be less likely that they would go back. So I really like what the river basically symbolizes. One thing that bothers me a little bit is how fucking easily they build a boat, because apparently these kids are fucking geniuses. And I know it's been set up for all of them that they know how to do this and this and this. Like, it's been set up that Hope knows how to build maybe mechanical stuff or chemistry stuff or whatever. She had built a still for alcohol back at her place. And Silas had fixed, I don't know what's the word for it, boilers? He had fixed boilers, so it's explained how they are able to make this engine for the boat, but it's really fucking convenient at the same time, you know? It definitely feels contrived, is what I'm trying to say. But at least they've explained it in the story, so I'm not gonna complain too much about that. But yeah, other than some of the interactions, like, and conflicts that we had in this episode, there's not much to say about it other than that. The only other thing I guess that I could say is that I really like the idea of using natural disaster, or in this case a lightning storm in this episode. I feel like they still could have done it more creatively and used it more, but at the very least having a lightning in the episode unleash a horde of walkers, it was kind of interesting. And I really like how they did it basically by having one of the characters say, "Hey, are you feeling the electricity in the air?" That's not what she said, but it's basically what she said. And then the lightning struck and opened a barn full of walkers. Like, that's cool, that's interesting. I wish natural disasters in general played a bigger role in the Walking Dead universe and were used more, because we've basically had them like 3 times. With this one, it's like 3 times. No, 4 times. There was the tornado in season 5 of the main show, when they were in that barn and holding back the door against the walkers. There's the blizzard in the season 9 finale of the main show. There's the hurricane in season 4 of Fear the Walking Dead, and now there's this lightning storm, which basically did anything. Barely did anything. But yeah, other than that, my enjoyment of this... other than that, my enjoyment of this episode is pretty much just the interactions. As I said, I like the interaction between Felix and Elton in the beginning, then the big conflict that arises when the others find out that Elton was conspiring with Felix about turning them back. And then there was a little heart-to-heart between Huck and Iris, and then Iris and Felix, I think it was as well. So that was nice. Like, the interactions were actually pretty interesting in this episode. And then at the end, I love how basically it forced Felix to, how to say it, to go with them and to be the one who pushes them into using the boat. I mean, he was already planning on using the boat to get back to the colony using the river, but I feel like at the end of the episode, when he had to help them push the boat, it kind of, he was doing it not with the thought that he could use the boat to get them back to the colony with the river, but he was genuinely wishing to go with them and save the dad. And I think it was in this episode, I'm not sure, because for me the 2 episodes, episode 5 and episode 6, are a little blurred, because one of the episodes ended on a cliffhanger, so it's hard for me to think of which things were in which episode. But I think in this episode there was, because there was a lot of a focus on Elton, It's where the flashbacks to the beginning of the zombie apocalypse with Elton's family happened. And I gotta say, I actually enjoyed those flashbacks quite a lot. I think the little Elton actor did a pretty decent job. I really liked his scared face. It definitely felt like he was scared. I can definitely see somebody see it as shitty acting by a kid, but for me it worked. I think it worked really well. What's a little far-fetched is where at the end, when there was no walkers around the box, so he was hiding in, and he got out, he basically just found a map and went to the safe place. Like, that's very unlikely for him to survive that. I just cannot buy that. At the end of the day, it doesn't bother me too much, but it's something that I just do not believe a 5-year-old, I think that's how old they said he was, or 6-year-old, something around there. I just cannot believe that he's just gonna go to the place and he'll know to go to the place. Like, when I was 6 years old, I was a pretty smart kid, for my age for sure. Like, I was able to read. I think by the age of like 4 or 5 I was able to read and be able to calculate stuff that you would usually study in like 4th or 5th grade of school. Well, I'd say maybe that's a little bit far-fetched, but I was able to multiply at that age. I was able to multiply like 2 by 5 equals 10, you know? And still, I don't believe I would have been smart enough or aware enough to know to go to that place for safety, you know? But yeah, this actually was pretty decent episode, and it honestly might be my favorite so far, because it did the most for the characters, and the interactions between the characters were the most interesting in this one, because we had a lot of interactions between Elton and Hope, and we finally had Hope find out that the woman that she shot at the beginning of the zombie apocalypse was actually Elton's mom. And I really like this connection between them, and I really am excited to see where this is going to go, because this is so far the most interesting thing, I would say, about the series. Outside of the CRM stuff, which I barely count as part of this series. Which brings me about the fact that I completely forgot to talk about those things in the last episode, like the post end credit scene. I'm gonna talk about it in a second. But yeah, I really like that connection between them, and I really am interested to see where it's going to go. And then at the end of the episode, we meet a new character called Percy, which I'm going to talk about in the next episode, in the next video of World Beyond, of my thoughts on World Beyond. But at the very least, what I'm basically going to say is I like the name of the character, I like the idea of the character, but I don't really agree with how it works with the story. Like, I'm not sure whether I like how it works with the story. But he seems to be a character that is going to stay, so we'll see where that's gonna go. Okay, so before we get into my thoughts on the post-credit scene of the last episode, I just quickly want to say my ratings for this episode. And I think for this episode, I'm going to give it a 6.8 out of 10. You might notice that this might be the highest score I've given to an episode of this series, but yeah, this was actually a really enjoyable episode. It was still not an good, enjoyable episode, but for this series, so far, it's probably the best one. Because the characters worked the best, there was actual interesting conflict, and I was engaged in the conflict and what the characters were going through and what the characters were doing. So yeah, I really wonder how this series is going to feel after it's done and rewatching it, because when I watched Fear the Walking Dead Season 1, I similarly, well, not necessarily similarly, but I didn't really think too much of it. I didn't hate it, I actually decently enjoyed it, but when we were done with like Season 3 and we basically had a reboot for Fear, and I went back to rewatch Season 1 and 2 and 3, and then I rewatched it again, each time I was so much more invested in the first 2 seasons, now that that was basically the series. Like there wasn't going to be much more of that Fear the Walking Dead past season 3. Like those seasons were much more enjoyable on a rewatch than they were week to week. So I'm curious how I'm gonna feel about this series then, because I feel like when I don't have to wait a week to week for these episodes, it's probably not gonna be as bad. But yeah, it's still not good. I would still not call it good. It's average. And I think a lot of people are overhating this show. And I can understand hating it for not being good, but calling it trash? And saying that Fear the Walking Dead Season 5 is better than this? No. No, that's complete bullshit. Fear the Walking Dead Season 5 was complete trash. It was annoying, it was boring, it was just completely fucking stupid. Do I need to remind you of the fucking beer balloon? It had some merit and good ideas. I like the idea of kids who were left without their parents surviving in the zombie apocalypse, but it wasn't really done with the weight and seriousness that it should have been done. And I like the idea of radioactive walkers, but again, they didn't execute it properly. It was cool, but it wasn't as cool as it could have been. And just a stupid idea that they cannot get out of the place without a fucking plane? Why? Why? Were they on a fucking island? I don't know, it was stupid. This, on the other hand, is the biggest fault for this series is just that it's boring, slow, and a little pretentious. That's the biggest fault of this series. Otherwise, the acting is pretty good, the characters are largely good. Like, at least the majority of the cast is interesting. There's some interesting things about Silas that I feel like they just haven't focused on him enough and have him do much stuff. I feel like he just needs a little bit more energy, I don't know. Elton is pretty interesting, Felix is pretty interesting, Hope is interesting as well, and the serum stuff as well. And you cannot tell me that Fear the Walking Dead Season 5 is better than this. I'm sorry. It might have been more interesting because it might have been so bad it's good, but I would rather prefer a boring series, like, in terms of quality, and if I had to choose what to watch, I would rather watch this boring and slow series rather than one that completely shits on the tone and feel of The Walking Dead. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel about it. So yeah, for this episode, as I said, I'm gonna give it 6.4 to 6.8 out of 10 at best. It's a good episode for this series. It's still a subpar for most of the other ones, but hey, I'll take what I can get. So yeah, sharing my thoughts on the post-credit scene of the last episode. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter too much. I think that is pretty much why I didn't really talk about it in the last video, because I forgot, because it doesn't fucking matter. It's a post-credit scene that is largely not connected to anything, except just sprinkling more stuff about the CRM, and apparently they're looking for a cure. Boo-hoo! Who cares? I was curious to see maybe whether we were going to see a Walker Rick look-alike in those walkers that they were moving on those things, but it wouldn't make any sense because they would basically be spoiling the fact that Rick is dead and people would be fucking pissed, so that was not going to happen. But still, that was something that I was looking to see. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel like something The Walking Dead needs to do, or I want The Walking Dead to do. And I'm gonna get into something similar in my review for the next episode, because there was something else that kind of gave me a similar vibe that I got from this scene. But I just don't really like that idea, what they're trying to do. They're trying to connect all these shows, and that they're trying to build a big villain that has, like, okay, how to explain it? They're trying to build this big overarching villain that has a big goal, and that is everywhere around the United States, and that is the last hope of the world. And to me, this just feels too much like Umbrella from Resident Evil, the movie series, or like Wicked from the Maze Runner series. And I know it's probably not gonna be done the same way, like it's still different, there's different aspects to it. I just don't like this storyline of of a big organization trying to find a cure, and obviously going to fail, and if it doesn't fail, it's gonna ruin everything I like about The Walking Dead, because I don't like the idea of The Walking Dead virus having a cure, because it completely misunderstands the point of this series in general. So I just don't really like it. So for me, that scene at the end didn't really matter much. I would like to see a big fight with this organization, but I don't want them to find the cure. I want them to work towards a cure. And it just pisses me off that they're also, the way they're also portraying it, that they're finding a cure, they're basically forcefully killing innocent people just to find a dumb cure. Basically what the Wicked organization did in the Maze Runner. And it's not new idea, it's not a good idea, and I just don't really like it. So ultimately, I don't really care about that post-credit scene. To me, it might as well doesn't exist, because it also doesn't really connect to anything that we've seen so far. It's just basically kind of set up that maybe the dad of the girls is a walker that is gonna be experimented on, and he's dead. I really hope they don't find immunity or anything like that, because that's gonna piss me off even more. But yeah, that's how I feel about this episode and the post-credit scene of the last episode. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Also, check out the link in the description to my Twitter if you don't follow me there, and to my Wattpad where I post my stories, because in addition to doing all these videos on my channel, I'm also a writer. And if you end up enjoying my stories, or you simply enjoy my videos, you can head over to Patreon, where you can pledge your support and help keep the channel going and help support me so I can keep writing the stories you enjoy. But still, if you don't want to do it, that's completely fine. You can still help me out by liking this video, subscribing, and especially sharing this video with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And I think it's pretty much it for this video, so hopefully I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye!